April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, an important time to educate ourselves on resources and raise awareness on ending sexual violence. Sexual assault is a pervasive crisis in South Asian communities, but our culture of silence inhibits many survivors from accessing the support they need. Joining me this morning for this crucial discussion are Rachna Khare and Pam Otal from Daya, a Houston-based organization that empowers South Asian and other similar immigrant survivors of domestic and sexual violence. So without further ado, let's just start and dive right in because it's so important to talk about it. And, let's start with the definition of sexual assault.
Yeah, so, and it seems like it would be really basic, right? But we hear different terms: sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual violence. So there's all different kind of terms that people use to talk about the issue. When we think of sexual violence as a broad category, or sexual assault, I think the first thing that comes to people's mind is forcible rape, right? But it's so much beyond that, right? So sexual assault includes any unwanted touching, any coerced sex as well, right? So that includes with drugs or with alcohol when you're in a state not to consent. It involves words as well, right? So when we think about sexual harassment, when we think about people in positions of power who will use sexual innuendos with people, who will threaten people, who will force sexual favors from people for advances in their career or in their schooling. Sexual violence really encompasses all of that, as well as people who were adults who were sexually abused as children. Those are survivors of sexual violence as well. And they may think, oh, well, so much time has passed, or this happened to me when I was 5 and it was a family friend. I mean, we see these kinds of cases frequently at Daya, and it's generally from victims of domestic violence who also have these instances of sexual violence or sexual assault in their past. And all of that leads to what we call the continuum of gender-based violence. So it's really putting primarily women and at a more vulnerable state, in that we normalize these experiences, and women will tend to grow to say, like, this is just the way it is. We at Daya want to say that it doesn't have to be this way. Every 68 seconds, somebody is sexually assaulted, and that's insane. Like, those statistics are just unacceptable. Really, the other thing is we think of that like stranger in the bushes, right? Or like a stranger commits rape. Our governor last year, maybe it was last year, said that we will get all the rapists off the streets. So the reality is 8 out of 10 times, the person committing the violence knows the victim, and the victim knows that person. So it can get very complicated. It's often your partner or your friend or your coworker or your family member. It's somebody that knows you. And there's this grooming process that can happen where they will get into your head and really think, and the victim will feel like they owe it to that person. So our message is that really you never owe anyone any kind of sexual contact, that your bodily autonomy is always yours. Whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you've been married for decades, whether you're a newlywed, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, however you identify in terms of gender identity or sexual orientation, sexual assault can happen to anyone. And it's happening quite frequent, and it's happening by people that are known to the victim. And so it can get very complicated, and there's a lot of shame and guilt in our community to even talk about sex, and this is why victims have a hard time coming forward and seeking help, because they think to themselves, did I do something to deserve this? And the reality is you never do. Whether there's drugs or alcohol involved, when one person exerts power over another person to exploit them in a sexual way, whether that's through penetrative sex, whether that's through touching, whether that's through kissing, whether that's through words, it's never, ever the victim's fault.
Yeah. Wow. It is, we don't talk about it, and also someone who has gone through it is really difficult to even, like share it, right? Because there's so much judgment, and they always like, what will the community think, or what will the family think?
And you're asking yourself questions. Oh, what could I have done differently? And then so for
Yes.
other people to ask the question of you, well, were you drinking? What were I hate that we're still asking, what were you wearing? I hope that's less common now, but frequently, especially for younger adults, oh, were you partying? Were you drinking? Were you on drugs? A lot of people can engage in those activities and not sexually assault somebody. And so
Right.
while drugs and alcohol can inhibit your judgment, it's never ever at the core. The core of sexual assault is always about entitlement, about power, about control.
Okay. So for instance, if a friend, comes to me and shares that what happened to her, right? And so for me, what do I say? Or how do I make her feel like, it's not her fault? How do I begin the conversation? Because that is very difficult, because we
It's
don't
really
want
hard.
to, it is hard, and we
Yeah.
don't, want to make her feel that it's her fault. So
Yeah.
how do we begin that
I
conversation?
think you just said it, right? Like the words, this wasn't your fault. Those words are so powerful because we never say them. It's not something you hear, and I want to believe there's so many wonderful allies out there that are thinking these things, that are thinking, oh my gosh, it's not this person's fault. But to vocalize that is very, very powerful. I think the most important thing to say is it's not your fault. I'll keep this confidential. I'll keep this a secret between you and I. There's lots of reasons why people don't want to report their sexual assault, and those are very valid reasons. I won't tell anyone is a powerful thing, and then I'm here to listen and
Okay.
help you find help. And that can look like a lot of different things, which we'll keep
It
talking about.
changes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It
There's
changes.
lots of ways. The bright side is there's lots of ways to get help.
Okay. So, why is it important to raise awareness about this topic each year? We talk about it. We've had you all every year on Chai Time. So, why do we always have to stress on this topic?
I think that goes to like the overall impact of sexual violence on survivors, and I'll let and not just survivors, on everyone in the community. And
Right.
I'll let Pam talk a little bit about that, the way it impacts literally everybody.
No, yeah, and absolutely. I feel like sexual violence and just sexual assault as well, like it's such a scary thing to think about happening to you or someone that you love, that like you want it to be like, okay, physically that person's ears are like this, so I know that they're like a perpetrator, but it doesn't work that way. Like you can look at someone, know them your entire life, and not realize that they are someone who's committing sexual assault. And one thing, I've had the privilege of being an instructor at Rice University, teaching a course in critical thinking and sexuality. And it was kind of mind boggling to me to learn that a lot of students, like particularly male students, didn't really understand sexual assault, like how that happened, or like behaviors that they may or may be not be doing were actually very harmful. Like not realizing that asking someone repeatedly to have sex with them until like that no and turned into a yes, like they didn't realize that was wrong. They're like, no, 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 I finally, like they said yes, so it's fine. But so yeah, I think just kind of spreading that awareness, like a lot of people in our community are perpetrating sexual assault. And I know that's not something that we really want to believe is happening. That people in our like community members are capable of such harm, but I think through spreading this awareness, like we'll not only create this like safety for survivors to get the support and healing that they need, but also build this education around what you can do to be respectful in relationships. How can you be sure that you're treating people safely?
I love that. I love that so much. And that's so true, because I think a lot of times we put our lens on survivors, and especially at Daya, we put our eye on, oh, is what it is that survivors need. But you're right. Like building awareness about this topic can help prevent it in a multitude of ways, because there's a lot of reasons, like the media and in music and in movies and on TV, where, you know, that's a great example. Like consistently, like asking someone again and again and again to have sex until they break down and finally say yes. Like that's part of like comedy, right? And it's actually like we have to separate the art from the reality there, because in real life, that's actually forcing somebody to have sex with you, which is, again, I would hope with the right education, not a thing that most people want to do.
So let's talk about consent. Like let's define consent first, and kind of, because that is also something that a lot of people get confused about when, with the word consent.
Yeah. So I love that and we can both talk about our ideas about consent, because I love that you said the word consent, because the beauty of consent, and maybe the hard part too, is that it's not just words. So you can hear, yeah, okay, fine. And you may, that technically, that's a yes, right?
Yes.
But the thing about consent, and I remember for many years, I hear people say, oh, what do you want me to get somebody to sign a contract before we have sex? Like, absolutely not. Like, that's why it's not just the words. Like, read somebody's body language. Are they pushing away from you a little bit? Are they tensing up when you come near them? Are they pausing? Silence to me, there used to be when I was young, you all remember, we used to say like, no means no, right?
Yes.
But we've flipped that a little bit. Now it's like, you need a yes. Like the absence of a no is not a yes, right? And so I think it's important to know that just because someone doesn't say no does not mean that they're saying yes, right? Like, are they and even if they say yes, what are the stipulations around this? Have you asked them, to Pam's point, 1,000,000 times to have sex with you? Are they in your house and they can't, easily and comfortably leave the situation? Are they intoxicated and can't drive home? There's all these factors. And really, to me, whenever you're in a position where you even pause for a second because you think, hey, something's not quite right, or this person is pausing. A pause to me is a clear no. The thing about sex, and I think like young people here have kind of scarcity mentality around sex, like, oh my gosh, I have to have sex, and it's like, no, this can also happen next week. This can also happen next month. This can also happen next year. And consent to me requires not just a verbal yes, but it requires a biological yes, a physical yes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just kind of adding on that, like, I don't think you should ever make assumptions around consent as well. Like, even though you might be married to someone or have been together for a long time, you can't just always assume that whenever you would like to have sex, like, they have to give it to you. Like, no one owes that to you. And so it's important that, you really keep that communication. A lot of consent, like Rachna was kind of explaining, is that communication, like talking to each other, and also that those nonverbal cues, like, are they pulling away? Are they kind of like their mind isn't there? Are they just like not really moving? Like paying attention to all of that. And also, like, I know, like, whenever you're married, even though it might feel like, oh, it's our anniversary, like we're supposed to do it, but if you don't want to, like, you don't have to.
Yeah. And I think
the way you
right.
put it that
makes
way.
for, I think it makes for kind of, it's the stereotype we see on like sitcoms, right? About like the wife being like, okay, fine. But really that okay, fine is not okay, fine. Like it's actually okay to like not, it's actually, you shouldn't have sex when you don't want to have sex. I think like that's always the messaging that we're trying to get out there, is that no one owes anyone sex, no matter what that relationship looks like.
Yeah. So I guess the conversation, the communication has to change. The words have to change. Like, no, I don't want, I don't want to do it today. And basically, that it has to come out right that way for us as couples or.
And I think that there's a lot of times where, especially for young boys and young men, growing young men, like they are also taught messaging where they're supposed to want to have sex all the time, or how could you not want to have sex? Like it almost emasculates them if they don't want to have sex. And that's also poor messaging. It's completely fine for people of any gender identity to want or not want sex. Girls who want to have sex are sluts and boys who don't want to have sex are prudes. And there's
Yeah.
got to be
The
a change.
labeling.
Yeah,
Oh my
there's
gosh.
got to be a change there.
Yeah. So are there any sort of like what do you call it, with like if organizations that go to schools talk about it, or is there anything as such that is
Yeah, so like actually Daya does go to schools. Our director of prevention and education, Tisha
Right.
Bedi, does this wonderful healthy relationships
Yeah.
training where she talks about sex in as part of not just like, how to like do it, but like how like to communicate, like what or how can you learn about what you like about sex, like the talking about pleasure and talking about consent, like a very kind of holistic view of having sex and healthy relationships. And I know there are a lot of other great organizations like Daya who are doing the work. And then I know for me, I actually learned about sex at school, seventh grade biology class.
Yeah.
So I think I assume still like for South Asian kids, a lot of their parents probably are not talking to them about it. And so school is a place where they learn, like, you learn about math. That should be a place where you should have that safe
Yeah.
space to learn about sex and relationships as well.
Yeah. So what does a healthy relationship look like when it comes to sexual health?
Right. So I think sex, like, even though it's such a kind of omnipresent thing in our lives, we actually don't talk about sexual health very much, which I always thought was kind of strange. But yes, sex and sexual health are very important. So we definitely need to normalize talking and learning about it a lot more. And Desi culture is largely a purity-based culture where we place a very high emphasis on abstinence, especially for women. Like,
And isn't that
women,
happening in the schools too,
Yeah,
right? I mean, there's a
absolutely.
lot of abstinence-based, sorry to interrupt, but I
Oh,
think
no,
like
absolutely.
that's the messaging a lot of kids are getting, and that's scary,
No, yeah. I
that-
remember in ninth grade in my health class, I took it over the summer. So it was the football coach who was teaching it.
Oh, my.
And our sex education was like, okay, raise your hand if you want to marry a virgin. And
Oh, my
obviously everyone
gosh.
raised their hand, and he was like, so then stay virgins. And that was it. That was my sex education.
And so for
class.
parents out there, that's a message. You really need to be doing some work at home too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, because of this kind of like purity culture, oftentimes sex and discussions of sex outside of marriage, and they see like families is highly stigmatized and even considered like sinful. Like,
Yeah.
it's a bop to even talk about it or like touch yourself or think about it. So even if a kid is asking their parents questions, like out of just genuine curiosity, because it is something like as kids kind of get to fourth or fifth grade, they're hearing about it,
Yeah.
and like obviously they want to go to their parents who they've learned so much about. But I think a lot of parents, they're so uncomfortable. They feel like, I don't want my kid having sex yet. Let me just shut this down. But I really don't think that's what you should do, because then it creates this shame. And so people associate having sex or thinking about sex with something that's like they shouldn't do it, or like they can't talk to their parents about it. Like they'll get in trouble.
So I have a question. What's a good age for you to have this conversation with your child? Because my 9-year-old then was 5 years old, heard the word sex, and came to me and asked me, and I said, "Oh, it just means male or female," because I wasn't sure that.
You're like biological sex. You're like, I answered it.
That's what I said. But
Honestly, I feel like you can start these conversations as early as possible. And especially when it comes to preventing sexual violence, great opportunities. When you have a 1-2-year-old, and we've talked about this on the show before,
Yeah.
don't force the hug. They don't have to hug or
Yeah.
kiss you or their, Rachna Mosi or anybody, right?
Right.
Like, it's as much as I want to hug you, as because they're adorable.
Yeah.
Knowing that their body is theirs, right? It's a very easy lesson to start that early, and that's going to prime them to come to you if somebody violates that boundary. When it comes to talking about actually the act of sex, it's going to vary by parent, by child, But if you're starting the conversation about bodily autonomy at a young age, that conversation's only going to get easier. And, now you're 9 years behind. So, just joking. 7 years behind. You're good still. But really, what sex can look like in a healthy relationship, I always come back to equality, respect, and choosing each other. Like, I feel like intimacy is this great privilege of choosing somebody and they're choosing you. And I don't mean like you have to be married or together in this really official capacity, but even in that situation, you are both making an informed decision to choose each other. And that's actually really powerful. And it leads to a great interaction, whether that's a long-term interaction or not. I mean, people break up too, right? So
Right. And yeah, so for many people, like as Rachna was saying, that like sex is a big part of their intimate relationship. And so having a healthy sex life has also been shown to be good for you emotionally and physically. Yeah. So it's really important that, people take the time, like individually, to kind of think through their boundaries, like what gives them pleasure, learn about themselves, really think through like, what am I okay with? What am I not okay with? And then communicate that. And so that you can build that trust with your partner, like whether you're together for the first time or you've been together for 60 years, like it's always important to be able to have that open communication, that good dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think that's really like once you have that healthy dialogue, that's where you can have that great sexual health within your relationship.
And I feel like that's a really good point because like Pam was talking about, this purity culture, this idea that we shouldn't talk about sex, then makes it difficult as an adult to talk about sex because you've never talked about it before. And so that's a really nice red flag for you, right? Like if you're having trouble, if you feel afraid to ask for what you want and or including saying no to things, then that's a red flag, right? That you're feeling fear. There's a difference, of course, between feeling embarrassment, nervousness versus, I'm afraid to tell this person no. And so those are kind of those instinctual red flags that we like to tell people about.
Yeah, and then also on the receiving end, be open to kind of hearing what your partner has to say.
Yes.
And actually respect what they're telling you. Like if they are saying that they do not like this, they don't want to do this, don't force them, don't pressure them, just kind of respect what they want to do so that you can keep that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And like what Sasha was saying, like at what age? But then also the next question is, as a parent for young children, how do you start that dialogue? How do you?
Wow. Yeah. Did you? It's like you knew. What Daya is starting a lot of we're starting to build a lot of materials. Tisha is about starting these conversations with children of various ages. So we're creating some materials. What we want to do at Daya is partner with parents and young people to help these conversations flow naturally between these two trusting people, the parent and the child, right? No one's saying it's not awkward, right? Like we know it's going to be an awkward conversation no matter what, but that doesn't mean we don't talk about things just because they're awkward, right? And so we're hoping that helping facilitate these conversations through tools and tips will be very helpful for our community. And some of the suggestions that we have are being really open-ended and listeners as parents. Let your child do most of the talking about what they think sex is or what they're learning about sex or what they've heard about sex so that you can see kind of where their baseline is and how to make sure that there's consent and respect and safety in everything that they're telling you. And you can interject those messages of equality, of safety, of you should always feel good about the situation. You can choose to change your mind at any time.
Yeah, that's a great point because like we always consider our kids they don't know anything, but
They
somehow
know so much. Yeah.
They do. They have such like early access to
Yes.
so much information now.
Yes, especially now through all kinds of social media and everything else, right? So it's
and
it's a whole
unfortunately,
different-
no one's fact checking everything on the internet, right? And
Right.
so as a parent, you can get ahead of that. You can start the conversation.
Okay, so it's time for break. Sasha's given us the signal. All right, so let's go on a short break, and when we return, we will continue our conversation with Rachna Khare and Pam Otal from Daya Houston. This is Chai Time on 99.5 FM. Welcome back to Chai Time on 99.5 FM. Today's topic is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We're talking with Pam Otal and Rachna Khare from Daya Houston. And we've been having such a great discussion, especially about ways that we have to change our dialogues with talking with kids or even with friends and things like that. So let's just continue with that. Okay, so what barriers do sexual assault survivors in the South Asian community face when they want to get help?
Right. So South Asian survivors encounter many barriers, unfortunately. So some of them are like accessing support, or to accessing support, I should say. So some of these barriers are like if they are limited English speaking, their visa status, if they have limited financial resources, if they have like a lack of knowledge about rights available to them. And then also something we see in a lot of South Asian survivors, particularly, is there's a distrust in systems. Like back home, speaking, I guess, a little bit more about India, like you can't really rely on a lot of the police or other kind of government systems there because there is a lot of corruption, and it just, like, for a lot of survivors there, they don't feel safe, and so when they come here they carry that kind of distrust and lack of like being able to rely on systems in place here to the US or throughout the diaspora as well. But I think the biggest barrier is the one that's like at the root of our community, and that is that cultural stigma, and like the worry of what people will say, like "log ki kahenge" or "log kya kahenge." And sexual assault is very much seen as a taboo topic in South Asia, and this is something that we carried with us to the West. It's not like that stigma; we didn't leave it whenever we got onto the airplane. And so, to me, it can sometimes feel like talking about sexual assault. Talking about survivors of sexual assault, how to help victims of sexual assault can sometimes actually be seen as less acceptable in Desi cultures than actually committing sexual assault.
Oh, that's so true.
And so, because of the stigma and the silence surrounding sexual assault, we're really feeding this rape culture in South Asian communities. And rape culture is a culture in which, sexual violence is treated as the norm and victims are blamed for their own assaults. So it's not just about sexual violence itself, but about, these cultural norms that protect rapists, shame victims, and demand that women make unreasonable sacrifices to avoid sexual assault. And so because of this rape culture, South Asian survivors do not often disclose their sexual assault. And those who do are frequently blamed and ostracized for being honest about their experiences. Some can even be cut off from their family and communities because, is that their, honor is such a big factor in the stigmatization of sexual assaults in South Asian communities. And so, preserving one's honor and the family's honor is often seen as more important than one's own safety. So, women are the ones who usually embody shame and honor in South Asian cultures. So they're expected to, be respectful and chaste and reserved. But women are also at the same time the ones who are held accountable for anything that might shame the family. And so this leads to a culture of silence surrounding sexual assault because victims want to avoid, shaming the family and risking punishments like, being cut off. And so it's this kind of shadowy silence that sexual violence kind of festers and continues to permeate our communities. And the reality is that this is a big problem in our community. A 2022 study of 18 to 34-year-old South Asian Americans living near the New York region found that 85% of those participants experienced some form of sexual assault. And so that's obviously a very astounding number. And also important to note is that of those survivors, a large large proportion, about 65%, reported that at least one of their perpetrators was South Asian. So sexual assault is affecting so many youths and other members of our community, and it is being perpetrated by so many in our community. And so this is a very big problem that we are definitely not acknowledging enough.
And if your perpetrator, again, 80% of the time is someone you know, when a daughter goes to her parents and says, "Hey, our family friend or my cousin or my uncle touched me inappropriately or did this thing to me or kissed me," right? Many times they're told, "Okay, just don't talk about that," because people don't know what next step to take. And oftentimes people have experienced the same kind of violence, right? So the more you experience it, you've experienced it, you pushed it down, and now you're asking your children to do the same.
Yeah. And I think, but when I look at movies now, when I compare to before, things have changed. Like things are changing for the better. If they're bringing out topics as such as, being a survivor and how they stand up for their right and they fight for it. So this is something, I mean, kudos to Bollywood movies who are taking that step, taking it further than just being the victim and
that's such a good example of where if you're watching a movie like that with your children or with your friends or with your family, and I've said this before too, you hit pause and you say, "Oh my gosh, what a great example of supporting survivors, of breaking this stigma."
Yeah.
Because it's great to call out the way we want to call out, and we should call out the bad things that we see. We can do the same with the positive messages that we're seeing too, and uplift those positive messages too.
Yeah, exactly. So how big is this problem in our community, and why is this crime so underreported?
So I think really it's what Pam talked about, the prevalence of it. My gosh, that is so big. And you've talked too about all the barriers and why people don't report. And the only thing I'll add to that, and then you can add some more too, is that the distrust in the systems is so real, and that is true for people that are born here as well. We've seen kind of time and time again, women of all backgrounds come forward, especially in the Me Too movement, with allegations of sexual assault that were discredited, that the abusive person saw no accountability, no repercussions. So the message we're sending is like, okay, even if you come forward, justice may not happen. And that, unfortunately, that's the reality. One of the biggest lessons I've had in this work is that rightfully so, our justice system is built to protect the person being accused, right? Because you're in America, you're innocent until proven guilty, hopefully, right? And so a lot of these systems are focusing on making sure that perpetrator has the infrastructure to prove their innocence, right? Versus giving justice to the victim. And that's why community-based organizations, victim services organizations are so important, because we exist only for that reason, only to help the victims find healing and justice. And I'll tell you, it is not often like your day in court. My friend Aparna Bhattacharya, who leads Raksha in Atlanta, similar to Daya, she wants to have a whole event on this, on how in TV and movies, victims get kind of their day in court and get to tell their story. The reality is that that's not the way courtrooms often work. And so when victims are looking for justice, we as a community need to be more innovative about how are we defining justice.
Yeah, and I would just kind of adding to that, I think another thing that kind of makes this problem really complicated is whenever you add technology into it. And so especially for the youth now, like as technology kind of modernizes and grows and innovates, unfortunately that's reflected in sexual assaults as well. Like more and more often it's happening digitally, like through non-consensual image sharing, or through just other kind of ways of stalking someone online. And so that's also something that, like, as like, we've learned about how sexual assault can happen in intimate partner violence, or intimate partner relationships, and now it's like, okay, well, technology is being introduced to it. So unfortunately, like, a lot of advocates were kind of lagging and trying to keep up with like how these things are evolving and trending. And so yeah, that's also, I think, one of the big problems is just kind of keeping up with technology as well.
And I think at the very, like, also we think of it just like, we can sit for a second and think about it right now, all of our listeners, how scary it would be to go make a police report against somebody you know.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily want that person to go to jail. You don't want this to become public, right? And if it's a stranger, if a stranger or acquaintance sexual assault, how scary that is. Do they know where you live? What could they do to retaliate? There's a lot of fear out there, and it all, who's going to believe me? Yeah. And then if after your sexual assault, you take a shower and throw away the clothes that you were wearing during the assault, where's your evidence, right? A lot of reporting has to do with evidence, and sexual violence is broad and involves a lot of approaches that Pam's talking about, posting altered images of you to make you look naked, right? Whether that's a real picture or not, right? That can spread like wildfire. And what are the repercussions of that? And is it worth it? And we've talked to, unfortunately, many victims who have said that process of reporting to the police and going through the legal system ended up not being worth it for them. But I want to tell survivors out there that the reporting doesn't have to look like this official reporting to police, that there's organizations like Daya that are here to help you in the ways that we can, honoring the ways that you want to tell your story, because it may not be to the police or to a court or to a lawyer. It may be to a therapist, right? It may be to a support group. It may be to, dealing with your, working on yourself through meditation and healing through different modalities. And we're here to help you think through all those options. Like, what can your healing look like? And working with law enforcement and reporting can be one part of it, but it doesn't have to be. And it definitely doesn't have to be the whole piece of it.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you mentioned, Pam, about digital, because that is something that didn't even like occur in my mind, because we constantly talk about everything else, but we don't talk about the digital part of it and how that also mentally affects a survivor and how they, things can go wrong for a lot of
lots of trauma, right? I mean, if these rumors start about you, and nowadays people all these texts can be anonymous, right? You can't even trace it back to a person, and you think of somebody who's in high school, or actually at any age, and it's very traumatic. It's a kind of bullying that you can't trace back, right? And this is, again, without the right mental health support, without the supportive people around you, your family, your friends, your community, there's a risk for suicide there too, as well. And so this all ties together, because these traumas unfortunately lead to more pain for survivors.
Right. Yeah, and just because something happened on a screen and not like someone didn't touch you like physically, that doesn't mean that they're like that hurt wasn't still there. Like, it might even hurt more, like especially like with how digital our communities are now, especially with community, with our Desi community. Like, everyone talks on WhatsApp, or everyone is on Facebook. And so if someone does post a picture of you there without your consent, that is so damaging. And especially, like, again, in our, very conservative culture, is like, if someone's if something that like that does happen to someone, like that kind of shame and really like trauma that they'll feel from the community, and that ostracization is really difficult. And so that on screens, in person, in every form of sexual assault is something that we need to make sure that we are aware of, and so that we can really support survivors and like help stop.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it goes back to that family reputation you were talking about too, because if something gets out on WhatsApp, you may have never wanted, obviously you didn't want that to get out, and that might have been the reason that you didn't report, but it can get out anyway. And then that repercussion of, oh, I've tarnished my family's reputation. The good news on this is, though, like as family members, we can start prioritizing loving our people over the reputation of our family. And I'm going to use the term reputation real loosely. What is that? What does it even matter what somebody is saying about your family? If at your core, this goes back to healthy relationships, if there's equity, if there's love, communication, and trust amongst a family, we need to be choosing each other over our reputation.
Yeah, that's so true. So share with us some of the services that Daya provides to sexual assault survivors.
Yes, so I think this is really important. Daya's services, of course, are open to any survivor of sexual violence. If you are even considering maybe have experienced a sexual assault, maybe that's what that was. Maybe that's why I'm feeling depressed or anxious. I encourage you to make a phone call. So our helpline is 713-981-7645. And at the beginning, we provide safety planning. And what that looks like is thinking about your physical safety as well as your emotional safety. So coping mechanisms, referrals and resources on what your rights are, referrals to legal services, and we will walk along that process with you, right? So if it is a situation, we will always talk through options. That's what we are here for, is here are all your options, and then let's work together and see what these options could look like and which ones you want to pursue, and which ones you want to pursue first. So maybe you want to go through the legal system. Maybe you want to make a police report. Daya will go with you through all of these processes. At the same time, there's other things, right? If you are sexually assaulted recently, there's medical support that is free and confidential for you. That is state funded. That is your right as a victim of sexual assault. We will go with you to the hospital. We have connections with the nurses that perform these exams to make sure that you are safe, that you have not gotten an STI, that you are not pregnant, those types of safety issues, and can also document and capture all that evidence if and when you would like to make a report in the future. So it puts a pause on you, so you don't have to think, oh my gosh, I have to make this report right now, right? So that's it's called a SANE exam, sexual assault nurse examiners, and that's an exam that we can accompany you to. The other thing is the mental health support. We have found that survivors of sexual assault need special kind of services, right? What has been violated is their body and even their sense of self within their own body. So at Daya, we provide counseling that includes counseling specific for trauma. So things that don't involve, you may not be ready to talk about your abuse, but it also involves mind-body work to help you form connections back with your body, because you should always feel strong and good and safe in your own body. And that's always going to be our goal. And then all of the advocacy services, right? Helping connect you to support groups with other survivors, helping you share your story later on if that's something you're interested in doing. But most importantly, helping you regain that control over your physical and mental wellness. And we have a variety of ways to do that, everything from legal, criminal justice, systems advocacy to mental health. It is always in your hands. It's always at your speed as a survivor. It's always your choice. And so I really encourage anyone that has been a survivor of sexual assault, no matter when it happened, to call our helpline, because there is support there for you. It's a completely non-judgmental zone at Daya, and it's completely confidential.
Yeah. What are ways to prevent sexual assault in our communities?
Well, there's so many.
I feel like Yeah, it really, I think it starts from education, like
Yeah.
really learning about what like sexual assault is, what the patriarchy is, and how that kind of how we assign gendered norms to certain like to males or females in all genders. So really kind of thinking that through, learning about how like violence against women, so really educating yourself on the issue is definitely, I think, one of the first things that will help prevent further violence. And then the next thing is definitely like taking what you've learned and talking to people about it. And I know that's not
That's
a
the
very
hard part.
comfortable
Yeah.
thing to do, like especially in our culture. Like no one wants to go to a family dinner and talk about sexual assaults. But that is really how you kind of start to change the culture, is by having everyone kind of change their mindset. So starting like at that kind of grassroots individual level, having those conversations with people kind of and it can come from kind of like a sharing first, so like talking about like, oh, like I've learned this, or like this happened to me when I was younger and I just recently learned now that that was assault. And so coming from a place where you're sharing first, it allows other people that safety to also kind of talk about what happened to them, and creating those bonds. And so once we all kind of have this kind of strong community of bonds, we're able to make sure that we have this safety net for survivors where no one will fall through. Everyone can kind of have that safe space, those services, and that dignity that they deserve. So that can also prevent further violence as well.
And I think one of some like quick and easy asks that I always have for the community is that like it is an uncomfortable topic, and it encompasses so much. I mean, we're talking about like patriarchy and gender norms.
Yeah.
This can be very difficult for people, but you can always start from a place of modeling and speaking about what a healthy relationship looks like, so that no matter what the age, that people can start to recognize what an unhealthy relationship looks like, right? So modeling that is really important. And then calling people in, right? So there are going to be the misogynistic jokes out there, and if you say, "Hey, that's not funny," you may be afraid to say something like that out loud because you don't want people to say, "Oh, you're being too sensitive. Oh my gosh, this is going too far. Oh, people are too upset about things." Okay, yes, we've all heard that. What you can do is this is somebody that you trust and care about, it's really great to pull somebody aside later or give them a call later and say, "Hey, when you made this joke, like it hurt me for these reasons, because I know your heart, and I want to believe that you don't find something like this funny." And so that's a great way to like help end that culture person by person in your life, But I do think that modeling what healthy relationships looks like, if you feel like you have a friend or a loved one that might need help, finding a time to talk to them privately and say, "Hey, I've seen this change in you. I'm worried about you. I want to make sure everything's okay." And also, I mean, I did this at the beginning of April. It's easier for me, I'll say, working at Daya, but I sent a mass text message to all my friends and I said, "Hey, I'm just going to put this out here, and this might sound a little weird, but if you or anyone you know has experienced like sexual assaults, either recently or long in the past, just know that you can talk to me and I'm here for you." Just that, right? And I feel like everyone has the power to do that within their networks, within their circle of friends, because now you know that you can say to that person, "I believe you, you didn't deserve this, and let's find some ways for you to get help." And we can be one of those ways. Please, by all means, give people our phone number, and we're happy to go on that journey. I mean, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. So do you all personally have seen changes within our South Asian communities?
Like changes, like positive
Positive changes.
I do.
I want to get your perspective on things, because you're always out involved with the community. So how much change, have you all seen, and is it positive, negative, any which way?
I think you can see a lot of change, honestly, generationally.
Right.
With the older generation, quite honestly, it is more women who are involved with Daya,
That's
who
true.
volunteer, who donate, come to our events. But with the younger generation, especially like, with college students and high school students, we see all of them getting involved. Young men, young boys, young girls, young women, they're all working together because they all realize this is an issue that is on them to help solve. And so, yeah, that's been a very positive thing to realize, that now people are like taking responsibility and trying to help address this big issue.
Yeah.
It's very hard too because it's an issue that's generations old, right? And so it can't be fixed in a decade, right? Or in even Daya's been around for 27 years. We can't solve it yet, right? Because this is thousands of years old. The idea that that a woman's body is to be owned, that a woman is to be owned. There are things that are so like strong, like these cultural ideas that are so normalized in our culture that are going to take just as long to change. But we have to go with the small wins, and I want to always believe that the more people come forward with their own stories, and God bless those people, because it is the stories that change people's hearts, right? It's never, it's not the statistics. It's always the stories. It's always once you know somebody is when you get it. The reality is we all know somebody.
Yes.
And so I want to believe that those stories help change people's hearts and minds around how serious this issue is and what the impact is and the ongoing impact. So my hope is that the more conversations like these that we have, the more people can start to fight against those norms, even in their own personal lives, and change those norms.
Yeah. All right. Wow, it's almost time to wrap up. So I just want to ask you all, what exciting events does Daya have coming up?
Yeah, so we have our annual storytelling event, Brown Bodies, Bold Stories, where we'll hear stories, poems, songs, and spoken word pieces from community members that are all going to celebrate the power of representation, specifically like Asian representation. And our
love this
keynote
event.
speaker, it is one of our favorite events
So
of the
great.
year. And yeah, we're so thankful that we get to have Varsha Bajaj speak this year, and she is a New York Times best-selling children's book author. So yeah, we're excited to have her kind of speak and talk about her journey and about how much she's seen, like having that representation, like what it's, how she's seen that change for South Asian boys and girls throughout the U.S. And so the event will take place on Saturday, May 6th at the Houston Public Library Central Library location from 11 to 1. And more information about the event can be found on our website, dayahouston.org, or our Facebook page.
Yeah, and we'll share that also on
That'd
our
be great,
Chai Time
yeah.
page as well. Yeah.
And Varsha's excellent. She has written Asian characters into her books, and also she recently co-created the American Doll 2023 Doll of the Year, which is a South Asian doll, Kavi Sharma.
Oh,
so,
wow.
so she is going to talk about. I mean, I think back when I was little, we didn't have like South Asian American dolls, and so she's going to talk about that process as well. So this will be really cool to see. And of course, our favorite part is community members sharing their stories and poems. Really talented people out there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachna and Pam, for joining us this morning on Chai Time. This was a very important topic to touch on, and we do this every year. So I really appreciate all that you do, that the whole entire team does for our community. Appreciate it.
Thank you for giving us the platform.
Thank you. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Chai Time. We shall see you same time next week. Signing off, Chai Time on 99.5 FM.